Chapter 1. Jorge, a.k.a. Chicken George. The last time George Mendez Rodriguez killed a man was the 4th of July in 1989, northwest of Laredo, behind a bar with a tin roof and a hard-pan floor. He unloaded 3 rounds of buckshot into the man before tearing out of the parking lot in the man's pickup with a pregnant St. Bernard named Susie in the cab and 5 kilos of cocaine in the fuel tank. 10 minutes later, he was 15 miles north of the bar doing 90 when he spotted the flashers of a patrol car approaching on the empty highway stretched out before him. He slowed to 60. When he recognized Deputy Harold Reynolds' face, George lifted a hand to acknowledge him as the two blew past each other. Reynolds was the first cop George had bought north of the border, a masterstroke owing to the fact that the drug mule he just gutted with the shotgun had been bawling the deputy's wife every Wednesday night for a month. Cutting the guy down just sealed the deal. Life was good. He beamed at Susie, stomped on the accelerator.
Welcome to Texas, girl.
14 months prior to Rummel's capital murder trial, March 26, 2018. George watched as the sun slipped behind the foothills of the Kiamichi Mountains, thinking he knew who'd stolen his 20 pounds of crystal meth in Kansas last month. Harold Buster Reynolds stood at the fire pit with George. Between them was a St. Bernard 6 generations removed from Susie. The spring air was cool and crisp and smelled of the pine trees around them. Buster spoke through a cigarette between his lips. "I had a sit-down with Miguel and Juan like you asked. Separately, of course. I won't hazard a guess at what you should do about them two." George clenched his teeth.
If they weren't my sons, I'd have them killed, right along with Dan Duran and Carter.
He glanced up the hill at the cabin and saw his wife, Luciana, through the big bay window, closing the shades. Buster pulled the cigarette from his lips as smoke drifted out of his nostrils. For a moment, George studied Buster's profile, long on nose and short on chin, looking for a reaction to what he'd just said. He and Buster had met at a Mexican cockfight 29 years ago, before Buster had a nickname, before George had managed to compromise the then deputy and put him in his pocket. Not that Buster hadn't benefited financially by their arrangement. That night years ago when George approached Harold on the bleachers surrounding the cockpit, he didn't know Harold's name, but he already knew the man was a deputy across the border in Webb County, Texas. He even knew the deputy lived with a woman in a double-wide trailer 5 miles west of Highway 83. He'd tracked the rival's drug runner to the double-wide the week before and watched through binoculars as the man parked his truck and went inside, reappearing in the doorway 20 minutes later kissing a pantless woman in a long shirt. George followed him north before passing tracking duties on to his brother and returning to the double-wide where, at dusk, he watched the deputy arrive with a pizza as the woman in the long shirt greeted him in the doorway. After George gave Harold a beer and told him about the drug runner and his woman, Harold sat stone-faced and watched roosters hack each other to death while listening to his proposal.